Hello and welcome to the KIT Link interviews, the Transatlantic update on the future of work. My name is Esther Legant, head of KIT Link, based at Karlsruhe's Institute of Technology. KIT Link is the strong bond between the German Southwest and the Silicon Valley. We started our interview series 3 weeks ago and received great interest and feedback. A big thank you to everyone making this possible. We discussed what we can learn from each other to build bridges between California and Germany for innovation, and we exchanged our challenges and how we focus together on the upcoming chances in these troubling times. It's our turn crisis, and we believe our unifying chance. With our KIT Link interviews, we reflect an assessment of the current transatlantic situation. By triggering new cooperations and joint projects, we create opportunities for this exchange beyond the scope of universities. We take responsibility to enhance relationships and form new ones between the two regions. In October 2019, Hal Varian and our team met at the Transatlantic Sync conference. We were both giving talks on the future of work. Our plan was to invite Hal for a talk to come back to Karlsruhe. But since traveling became almost impossible, we changed our plans to the following interview today. Greetings coming now from Christof Weinhardt, professor at the Institute for Information System and Management at the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. Enjoy Hal's talk and the series.
Hello everybody, my name is Christof Weinhardt and I'm holding a chair at the Institute of Information Systems and Marketing at KIT, the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. It is an honor for me to welcome my colleague and dear friend Hal Varian to the KIT Link interview today. Hal and I, we know each other already for a long time. We first met during my sabbatical at the University of California in Berkeley in the early 2000s. Hal was, and of course still is, an excellent and world-renowned economist and very well known for his outstanding research on options and mechanism design, with a huge impact on real-world problems. Today's business models of the most successful internet giants of Silicon Valley and of course from all over the world are based on his idea of the Google AdWords auctions. But at that time, Hal was the dean of the iSchool, the so-called School of Information at UC Berkeley, and it was in an old librarian building on this beautiful campus. And it was Hal's idea and mainly his effort to establish this very interdisciplinary school at that time. And researchers from many disciplines worked on what we name today the digitization of economy and society. Next to researchers from computer science, information systems, management and economics, lawyers, psychologists, political scientists and sociologists were teaching and collaborating in research very successfully at this school. And since I was hired at KIT in 2000 to foster the interdisciplinary study program Information Systems and Engineering, Informationswirtschaft in German, comprising computer science, economics, management and law, it was a perfect time to meet Hal. And I met him mainly at the Christmas party of his school, where we started our collaboration. From that moment on, we discussed many scientific topics as well as the future of the internet. Hal immediately helped me to network with many people in Silicon Valley. Thank you very much for that. Finally, we started a PhD program on information and market engineering, which was funded by DFG, the National Science Foundation of Germany. And for the inauguration celebration, we could win Hal for the keynote. And it was wonderful to see that all our students attended this event and brought their economics textbooks on microeconomics, which was written by Hal Varian, which was and still is always in use for Econ 1.1. Hal was obviously surprised, and he was ready to sign all of them, seeing that all the students were so excited about this book. In February 2006, Hal received the honorary doctorate of our Department of Economics and Management at the University in Karlsruhe, the predecessor institution of KIT. And KIT was founded in October 2009. And in the same year, Hal received the Humboldt Research Award and it was my honor to act as his host and welcome him in Karlsruhe again. Unfortunately, his research stay ended earlier as planned, but at least he had a very good excuse, since he became the chief economist of Google, where he's working until now. Nevertheless, I appreciate a lot that we managed to stay in touch over all these years. Whenever I had the chance to be on the West Coast, I used the opportunity for a short visit at his office on the Google campus. And it was great that he always made some time for the exchange of ideas about the newest developments in US, Europe, and Germany. And in this context, it's my special pleasure to warmly welcome today Hal Varian for this interview of KIT Link. KIT Link aims to be the bridge between society, industry, academia as a transatlantic network for innovative, high-quality research with future potential. I would like to point out the importance of the network like KIT Link for transatlantic cooperation between the innovative regions Silicon Valley and the German state of Baden-Württemberg. That offers a unique opportunity to connect like-minded people from academia, industry, startups, and students to exchange and to cooperate, to trigger new projects and cooperations, and to inspire each other. I wish you an inspiring and interesting KIT Link interview with Hal Varian now, talking on the major changes and challenges of the digital transatlantic economy. Hal, thank you for your time to share your views and thoughts with us today, and that you helped to pave the road for a transatlantic exchange and cooperation between two such innovative regions of the world. Thank you.
Welcome, everyone, to the KIT Link interview series, Embracing Change. All right, so today we have our guest, Hal Varian. We've already we've already had a great introduction, but I will nevertheless continue that on. So Hal Varian is the chief economist at Google, as we heard. He is also a professor emeritus at the University of California at Berkeley and a fellow at the Guggenheim Foundation, the Econometric Society, and the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. So in addition to being the author of 2 economic textbooks, which we've heard about, he's also the co-author of the best-selling book, Information Rules, a strategic guide to the network economy. And he received an honorary doctorate from our very own Karlsruhe University, now known as Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. And he received that in 2006. Welcome, Hal. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Great, Hal. I think we just are missing your sound. If you maybe hit your sound on the other device.
Here we go. Can you hear my sound now?
Yes, right. Perfect. Excellent. So, Hal, thank you so much for being here with us today and being such a trooper during this kind of technical mishap we've had, but we really appreciate it.
Well, these things happened.
Yes, of course.
These things happen all the time.
Yeah. So last time we saw you in Karlsruhe in Germany was, I believe, 2019. And you were here talking about the future of work. And now considering that a lot of things have changed in the past year and some time, wondering if you could maybe just talk about how things are different with the idea of future work now than they are back then.
Well, of course, there's been a lot of change just in the last year. People are working from home, they're telecommuting, having video meetings like this one rather than face-to-face meetings. And that's going to continue, in my view. We're going to see a lot of remote working and a lot of collaboration across geographies.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm so happy that you're here with us today to talk about the transatlantic digital economy. Now, just to kind of start us off, maybe you could help just define what is exactly the digital economy.
That is an excellent question because there's no sharp answer to it. Everything is digital these days. I mean, everybody is on their mobile phone, everybody's on their computer, everybody's communicating and getting work and pleasure, leisure as well, using digital devices. I think we're going to see tremendous advances, for example, in telemedicine and in computational biology, where there are a lot of opportunities. Even now, you know, they're testing vaccines for HIV. They're testing vaccines for malaria. Malaria has killed millions of people over the course of history. It may be gone in a few years.
Yeah. And, you know, a big part of the digital economy is data, if I'm correct. And data is such a big issue to talk about, especially when we talk about how we treat data, how secure data is, and how we trade data. What are your thoughts on that part of data?
Well, data is what we call an information good. It's often costly to create, but it's very inexpensive to duplicate, so that you can put your effort into creating and gathering the data, but then sharing it is basically costless. So there's a lot of activity going on in trying to figure out good business models for data sharing, data access, data presentation. We just created something at Google that I think you'll find interesting. It's data set search. So now with some topic, some area, you can go to Google, do data set search, and you are often able to find data sets that are available free of charge and accessible globally.
And then when we talk about the transatlantic digital economy, what kinds of things do we need to keep in mind when we talk about data, since that is such a big good?
Well, there are, as you well know, a debate going on now between the US and the European Union about what policies are appropriate for managing personal data. Now, personal data is only one kind of data, but it's one of the most discussed because people have interests in preserving privacy, and yet they also have an interest in making data available to other people. So you take this health area that we talked about a few minutes ago, that's often considered very sensitive data, but at the same time, there's huge value to sharing that data across different research enterprises. So these are the kinds of things that we're going to have to work out over the next few years.
And in Europe right now, there is this digital single market initiative. And there has been also the privacy shield between the US and the EU, which is a bit at a stalemate at the moment. But what do you think it would take, or what do you think both Europe and the US should keep in mind when we think about creating maybe a digital single market between us?
Well, I think there's a huge role for experimentation. Here in the US, we have 50 states. They have different policies with respect to information, data, for example. And it's kind of a laboratory for democracy. That is, that laboratory, people can try out different things and see what is the most effective. And I think the issue in Europe is that people rush to create a standard maybe a little earlier than would be desirable, because it's interesting to try out some different models and see which are going to work in the most effective way.
And when you said that Europe may be rushing a little bit, to set a standard, that is, could you tell us a little bit more about that and why it's important maybe to?
This data single market idea is a good idea. That's where we want to end up. But do we want to start out having that as an immediate model, or do you want to try a few different models in different places and see what seems to work the most effectively? So we have different, as you know now, in the US, for example, there's different privacy laws from state to state. And I think that in a few years, there will be a standard across the states. But until that time, we're gathering some experience with the existing models and finding out what seems to work and what doesn't work.
You have this, I believe, from your book that you were a co-author on, that that infrastructure is to technology as the bottle is to wine. Is that correct?
Did we really say that? Maybe, I guess.
Well, if that's the case, then what kind of infrastructure do you think we need in order to help with this, let's say, transatlantic digital economy?
Well, I would tell you the biggest problem that we face in our communication with colleagues, Google colleagues in Europe, is the time difference, because it's 9 hours, I think now, or maybe 8 hours. And there's only a small window when you can really have effective meetings. So one of the things we've tried to do is we've had that window is available for people on Monday through Thursday. And on Friday, we have a no meetings day, so that we try to compress the meetings into that available time slot.
So you mentioned some of the challenges that come with this transatlantic digital economy, but can you talk a little bit more about some of the opportunities that we have?
Oh, well, there's the same issue. The time zone is also a great benefit, that you can work 24 hours a day. So you work for an 8-hour day in California, and then
Sorry, Hal, I think we just lost your sound for 1 second.
Start a project in the US, and when the workday ends, it's continued in India, or vice versa. So it allows you to work kind of at double speed because of that capability.
Mm-hmm. So even there's a flip side to the challenges, it sounds like, that could be a positive as well.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And what about the role of AI in the transatlantic digital economy, and in the future of work in general?
Yeah. So AI is, of course, doing remarkable things. The protein folding, for example, this was a problem that people thought we would be able to solve with 50 years of research, and it was solved in a few months using AI. A lot of voice recognition, image recognition, many, many exciting things going on. But of course, we've still got a lot to learn. Because the computers generally do not operate with a context, the context that human beings apply when they're making choices. But if you can define the problem narrowly enough that it becomes computationally feasible, then you can do these remarkable things. For example, I don't know how many of you use Google Photos, but Google Photos has this absolutely incredible search. You can say, show me pictures of my dog, or show me pictures of my cat, and it will find pictures of dogs and cats in your collection. It's really quite remarkable.
And when we know that AI, a lot is happening there, and there's a lot of sort of innovative things happening in the future in general, right? And actually right now, what do you think is the most interesting at the moment?
I think right now these advances in health biology, those are really the most interesting advances going on at the moment. And again, because of COVID, we've had this compression where what would have previously been years of work have been compressed into a few months. You know, the initial idea for using messenger RNA for the vaccine, that idea was thought of and implemented in 48 hours over a weekend. And the rest of the time has involved testing and distribution and production and all these things. But the actual innovation took place very, very rapidly. And I expect we'll see a lot more of that going on in the future.
And speaking of that, because we know that there's a collaboration on the vaccine between the US and European countries and Germany in particular, what kind of other future collaborations can you see happen in the sort of transatlantic network?
Well, I can say with Google, we're of course investing a lot in Europe. We have a big research lab in München, and we have a new research lab for AI starting in Africa and Nigeria, and a lot of other quite important initiatives are taking place, not just transatlantic, but trans-Pacific, and in fact, globally. There's a huge amount of work that's going on in research related to AI and similar matters.
Mm-hmm. And, you know, when we talk about innovation, maybe you can give us some insight. What is innovation nowadays? It feels like everything is innovative. So what would, you know, so could you maybe help us see what is considered innovative nowadays, or what that really means at the moment?
Well, one of the things that's very interesting and exciting are things like adversarial AI. I don't know if you've seen this, but you may have heard of the experiment where we meaning Google, taught a computer the rules of chess and then had it play against itself. And over the weekend, in a few days, it became the best chess player in the world, just from that, with no data, which is quite remarkable. So people are very excited by the adversarial AI because that allows you to economize on data use in a quite important way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to think back again on some of the challenges that we face, especially when we talk about the transatlantic between the U.S. and Europe. What other challenges do you see besides, let's say, the time zone and so forth? What are some of the other challenges that are standing in our way? Besides, also, that Europe is a little bit more interested in standard setting first. What other challenges do you see?
Well, one of the challenges is the lawnmower outside.
Yes, we hear. It's life,
but
right?
It will be gone soon, so it'll be there just for a minute or two more. So the question is, what are the challenges? Well, these policy issues are a big challenge. The policy issues involving privacy, free speech, fake news, fraudulent activity. But these have gone along with every innovation. The same issues really came up with the telegraph. Same issues came up with the automobile. You had this wonderful innovation that everybody loved, but you had to build an entire infrastructure, an entire set of law, insurance, refueling. All of these things had to be developed as well. And the same thing is going to happen with AI. For example, there are proposals that when you are interacting with an AI rather than a human being, you should be told. Now, is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Is it really necessary in all cases? I don't know. But it's going to be something that we have to address in the future, because people in general are going to be interested in knowing whether they're talking to a human being or whether they're talking to an AI.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that issue of transparency in that sense will definitely be important. And, just coming back to the idea of data, and then also, thinking in the future, AI is going to be producing a lot of data, and sometimes that data is produced with really no designated owner. How do we deal with that kind of data? And how do we prevent, for instance, one company from monopolizing all the data or having all the data under its control?
Well, usually when you look at somebody who comes up with a good idea and develops a tool that people find useful in working with data or anything else, it's not very long until that is duplicated. If you know that something can be done, you're halfway there. So as soon as you're able to create, let's say, an AI that can communicate effectively, everybody else is going to work on that same project. So I see the IT world as having a lot of competition, especially on the research area, because people are actively exploiting, actively utilizing these new technologies to solve problems or to create tools that are useful to people's conduct in everyday life.
And when there's this idea of sort of like your digital potential, right? So Europe is considered to only be reaching 12% of its digital potential. And even Germany is a bit behind with, I think, 10%. I think the US is somewhere a bit higher, around 18%, but Asia is very far ahead. So what do you think we could learn? Let's say the US could learn from Germany or from Europe in the way that it's processing data or handling things. And what do you think Europe could learn from the US? What could we learn from each other?
Well, I think you're right that everybody is looking at what's going on in Asia, and there's been this incredible rapidity in development in China over the last generation. It's just remarkable. If you look back 35 years ago, China was poorer than India, and now, one generation later, you're seeing China being substantially larger GDP per capita than India has. And of course, in India, they would like to know how to do this remarkable development in their own country. But of course, many of the things that were done in China were taking advances from Germany, from the US, from Europe, and implementing them there using modern technology. So take the train system. Of course, Germany and much of Europe has this fantastic set of high-speed trains. The Chinese saw how they work. They could hire engineers and acquire knowledge and build a fantastic train system in China because they were starting from scratch. They had a blank slate that they could then develop, and that's of course been fantastic for that country.
And for the U.S. in particular, what do you think the U.S. could afford to learn from Europe when it's looking at the future of work and the transatlantic digital economy?
Well, there are, I think, lots of things to learn. One thing that I think is quite important, I would love to see happen in the U.S. is work sharing, which I think is pretty common in Germany. So if there's a downturn, if there's a recession, if there's a problem with the economy, then instead of laying off 10% of your workforce, you can all work 10% less. And that's a much, much better system than we've used here. I know it's used in Germany. I know it's used in the Netherlands in some cases, and other countries. That would be something that I think we should really adopt in the US. And there are steps in that direction.
Mm-hmm. And what about from Europe, from America?
Well, the big thing missing in Europe is a really robust venture capital system. Now, there is venture capital in Europe. It's much smaller than it is in the US, but it's just harder to find financing for startups, I think, in the European context than in the US. I mean, we have this tremendous model that's been developed over the years of venture capital funding for startups, and a process where the startup can acquire additional funding and go public or be acquired and all of these things. And that's just not as robust in Europe as it is in the US. So I think it would be important to have a system for financing highly risky projects. Banks can't do it for obvious reasons. And the venture capital market in Europe should really expand, in my view. And that would be, I think, fantastic for the economy, because there's so many good engineers and so much knowledge and experience that people have. They could develop very important companies if they had the funding sources that allow for this venture capital movement.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like there would be lots of opportunities for the US and for Europe and in particular Germany to collaborate. Is there anything else that you'd want to speak on that point?
Well, Europe has had and continues to have some highly successful companies. Nokia at one time was a very dominant force in the telecommunications market. Spotify is still doing well. SAP is, I think, the 50th largest company in the world, and it's been very important to at a global level. I think it's really going from these small companies with a few people, developing a product, finding funding, and building out from there. That's where the weakness lies at the moment. How can you get that same kind of innovative work being done at a small scale, at the startup level? That's I think where the biggest issue is. And I know venture capitalists are taking advantage of this because they're seeing these opportunities and investing now. It's just that it needs to scale up another order of magnitude before it really is an important force.
And what do you think it would take to scale that up?
Well, here, if you look at people who are successful with a startup, well, let's take Google, since that's the one I know best. Eventually, they leave the company, they go do something else, and in many, many cases, they become venture capitalists. So that it's a case where it's almost like moving into another phase. So that kind of mobility of working for a company, creating something new, and then going on to create another startup, that's a very common model here. And I haven't seen that as much in Europe. So it's more of a cultural thing, not so much as something that you can handle by legislation or by regulation. It's something where, well, this is a model that people have. When they're successful, they'll go start up again and have this serial stream of startups.
So you're right that the startup scene in Germany is still in sort of its fledgling stage. What do you think that, let's say, Silicon Valley could do to encourage that sort of fledgling stage to grow?
Well, there are lots of things. There are things like tax policy, for example. There are things like regulatory issues that could be streamlined. In the U.S., it's definitely true that the system of taxation that we have is friendly to startups, friendly to failure. I mean, this is another really important point. If you don't have some failures, you're not trying hard enough, because you need to be able to try things when you don't know if they will work, and then you have to expect that there will be many failures along the way. For tolerance for that, you need to have a policy that does not punish failure, but in fact recognizes that that's a critical part of innovation.
Mm-hmm. Now, I realize just because we're kind of coming down on time, and I do want to get some other questions in, so I'm going to open up the floor to questions here, if you don't mind, Hal.
Okay.
Let's see. We have a question here. How is cryptocurrency affecting the economy, considering the enormous market capital, growing demand, and increasing transactions without any costs?
Yeah. Well, I have to say, I don't think that governments will give up on or will allow private currencies to really flourish. My belief is that we will see governments, central banks adopting the cryptocurrency model and then using that as an improved way of handling payments, for example. But I'm pretty skeptical that there will be several currencies circulating at the same time, managed by private individuals or private enterprises. because governments are not going to let go of the role of central banks, in my view.
Yes, thank you for that. And what skills do you think are going to be useful in this digital transformation?
Well, it's a good question. A lot of it is organizational. That is, how do you create teams, allow the teams to work together effectively, create something new, develop an infrastructure that allows for continual innovation. You know, you were talking earlier about data and data manipulation. When Google acquires a company, the first thing they do is move that company over to the Google infrastructure. And that's not true of many other companies, because you find these data silos where one set of data is managed in this unit because that unit was acquired 5 years ago and nobody wanted to take the time to migrate that data silo to a standard operating mechanism within the company. So that uniformity is great. That standardization is fantastic, because you can move an engineer from one project to another and they will be up and running in a matter of days, not months or even years that you see in the traditional acquisition model. So having that enforced standard at the firm level is something that's very important in terms of actually getting things done easily and quickly.
Okay, thank you. Just a side question here about that. You know, we talking about what skills that you need, of course, and what's needed, but also in your talk, Bots and Tots, you do mention that there are some workers that are maybe left outside of this digital realm. And how can we move forward without leaving those people behind?
Yeah. Well, earlier you talked about what the US can learn from Germany and Europe. And one of the very important things is this model of apprenticeship, which is much more developed in Germany, I think, than almost any other country. And it's something that we've recognized in the US as being a problem, and are trying to take some steps to make these apprenticeships work more effectively. Because, you know, there is a shortage. There's a lot of demand for people with mechanical skills, for example. So not everything is going digital. Some things are still where you have to work with your hands, and you have to have a knowledge of how plumbing works or electricity wiring or all these other tasks. And I think that you have a better model there than we have here, but we hope to improve that over the next few years. I think you're muted, Francesca. Yes. Okay.
Thank you. I just was somehow muted and now they've unmuted me. Thank you for that. Technical things again.
Yes.
As we can see. So yeah, I just want to maybe throw one or two more questions out at you, if that's okay.
Okay.
There is a question here that says, what is your position on the economy turning hardware into a service? More specifically, what is your position on the right to repair when it comes to repair? Small repair is not infringing on product security. It's interesting.
Yes, that's an interesting question. And I think that there's going to be lots of different models. I mean, some things it's just impossible for an ordinary person to repair a device, a digital device, and sometimes it can be done. For example, it's very common to see cracked screens, or people drop their phone or they drop their tablet and break the screen. And now go to Google and type in screen repair near me, and you'll find little companies, little shops that do this kind of repair. But there are other things that really that just doesn't work. So I don't think there's a general solution. I think it has to be done looked at on a case by case basis.
Mm-hmm. And that makes sense. And just to go back to China for a second, somebody mentioned this comment here or question. What do you think is China's economic role going to be 10 years from now?
Well, China faces this huge demographic problem, as I'm sure you know. The one-child policy it was a disaster in terms of the country's economic health, and the population in China is already falling and is going to fall even more. We've also got this gender imbalance between males and females, which is a huge problem in itself. So China is going to face demographic problems for the next 30 years. And by the way, most developed countries, in fact, I'll venture to say pretty much all developed countries are having demographic problems. It's just China's is especially severe. So one of the reasons they're investing so heavily in robotics and in AI is because of that there are not enough people, or in the next few years, there will not be enough people to really run the economy at its current speed.
Yeah, you also mentioned that in your lecture, Bots and Tots, about how there's going to be this future labor shortage. What could we do to help that or prevent that?
Well, obviously robotics is one of the things, and you can see robotics in ways that we don't always think of as robots, namely vending machines. So if you go to Japan, as you know, there'll be vending machines for soup and noodles and sunglasses and all sorts of other things. That is a robot. It kind of sits in one place, but accepts money and gives you goods. We're going to see more of that going on in other countries outside of Japan. China's doing it, Korea's doing it, and we'll see it in Europe as well. So that technology, simple traditional technology, can definitely be improved by artificial intelligence, and in fact will help in dealing with this labor shortage that you mentioned.
Mm-hmm. And we have one last question here, which is, what advice do you have for young, ambitious people?
Well, there's lots of different things to do. You have to find what you love and do that. As my grandfather said, if you love your work, if you love what you're doing, you're never going to have to work a day in your life. And it's very much true. If you really enjoy the kinds of tasks that you're engaged in, then that's going to be the best thing for you. And it could be an apprenticeship, it could be a doctorate degree, it could be computer science, it could be manual labor. It's just you have to find your own way and experiment on a few things. It's not going to be the case in the future that you're going to do one thing your entire life. I think that you need to explore territory and find out what's really helpful for you. That's my best advice.
And what advice would you give to all of us here today when we think about this transatlantic digital economy and the relationship between the US and Europe? What could we be doing to strengthen our ties?
Well, I think it would be nice to resolve some of these issues that we discussed earlier about for example, privacy, safe harbors, that kind of stuff. And I would say in the U.S., we are reluctant to intervene and set the rules from the beginning. We like to see how things develop, and when we see a model that's working, then we could adopt that. This was a laboratory of democracy I talked to you about earlier. I'd like to see a little more of that going on in Europe, rather than rushing to regulate a sector. being somewhat more cautious and studying these different models, how they've been implemented in different places, and how successful they've been.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you so much, Hal Varian, for being with us today, and for giving us your time, and even more time than you planned because of our technical difficulties. Now,
Yeah.
is there any last words that you'd like to leave everybody with?
Well, I would have to say this, even though we had a rough start on getting this all going, it all worked out in the end. So maybe that's a good metaphor for the regulatory issues between the US and Europe, that there's been a bit of a rough start, but I think if we keep our vision on the prize, so we can have a truly global economy that combines the best of both continents, I think that would be a thing to work for.
Thank you so much.
Okay.
And yes, we hope to see you again soon.
All right. Thank you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.
Yep. Bye.
So thank you everyone for coming. And on a closing note, as always, I just want to take a moment on the behalf of the KIT Link team to thank all of you, our viewers, for joining us today and for toughing it out during these technical difficulties and for being a part of this transatlantic bridge. If you found today's talk valuable, it will somehow be posted on YouTube at some point. So please share it. The link will be available soon on the KIT Link website. So we hope that we will see you next time for our next talk, and have a wonderful day or evening, whichever side of the Atlantic you're on. Take care, everyone.